Hello. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Mike. I'm a product manager on Daydream. It's awesome to be here. So just to start things off, how many of you just attended the talk on Google VR? Yeah, I thought so. A lot of people. That's great. For those of you who weren't there, in that talk, we just announced Daydream Labs, our rapid prototyping effort. We're excited to tell you all about it, so we'll dive right in. At Google, we spend a lot of time thinking about what works well in VR. Our industry has come a long way exploring the possibilities, discovering its killer use cases, learning how to design a great experience. And part of what makes VR so exciting right now is that it's still early days. There is so much left to explore. So last year, we started Daydream Labs. Our goal is to experiment with VR and share what we learn with everyone. We do research and rapid prototyping on lots of things, like hardware and usability. One area we focus on is app experiments. We build bite-sized prototypes that allow us to quickly test a single hypothesis about VR. We don't focus on any particular product or platform, and we love building on all kinds of hardware: HTC Vive, Oculus, Daydream, and more. For each experiment, we try to pick the right tool for the job. And we try to move pretty fast. On average, we build 2 new app experiments each week. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the process for our rapid prototyping, we have another talk today at 4 p.m. that's all about it. Check it out. Just a quick overview of how we work. For each app experiment, we pair one engineer with one designer. They start the week building stuff. By the end of the week, they'll share it with a bunch of people, get their feedback, and see what we learned. And then we share those lessons within Google. Today, we're so excited to start sharing these lessons with everyone. In this talk, we'll walk through what we've learned across 3 areas. First, interactions. The amazing things you can do in VR with a controller. Second, immersion. Your environment in VR, and all of the things that contribute to a sense of presence. And finally, social. What it's like to share these experiences with other people. So with that, I'll hand it over to Stefan to talk to you about interactions. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Stefan Welker. I'm a software engineer on Daydream. Let's talk about interactions. To set some context, in VR, the main way people interact is by using a controller that is tracked in 3D space. What's awesome is that these controllers can look and act like any tool. Your controller can be a laser pointer that makes it possible to reach things that are far away. And that can be across the room or even across the whole galaxy. Controllers can also become your virtual hands. But there's no reason to limit yourself to these common input types. Your controller can also turn into a hammer, a tennis racket, a fishing rod, or even a frying pan. Come on, this is crazy. Your controller can become any tool or toy. In a sense, the visual representation drives its use. And since we humans are naturally good at using proxy objects like tools to manipulate the world, controllers also feel very natural. With accurate tracking in VR, the skills needed to interact with objects in the real world or in VR are already present in everybody. So nobody has to learn how to use a controller. Let's walk through a few of the interaction models that are possible. One of our first lessons was that direct manipulation of objects, for example, picking something up with your hands, is one of the most natural and satisfying input methods. In this experiment, we let you play drums, which was fun. We also gave people the ability to grab and move the drums by grabbing them with a controller. We learned that height adjustment and ergonomic positioning is really easy in VR. People quickly built their dream drum kits and started to play. There's no feeling like building your own drum fort and hiding inside it. We also found that everybody really likes throwing things in VR. Gestural input is a very powerful concept. In this prototype, you scoop up seeds and you water them with a watering can. People already know how to use a real watering can, so they expect the same behavior of these VR objects. There's no need for any buttons here. We then took it even a step further. In this experiment, people weren't holding a controller at all. They were holding a real watering can where we stuck a Vive controller inside. We matched the geometry, so it is really satisfying to touch an object in VR and in the real world at the same time. We added some weight, so it's weighted with a bag of water, and we expected that people would set it down because it would feel heavy. But it connected for them the real world and the virtual worlds together in a delightful manner. You can only imagine what kinds of objects could be tracked in VR in the future. Designing environments is much more natural when you are in the environment yourself. In this living room example, we give the user superpowers, like lifting heavy objects or even scaling them with a simple stretch gesture. Doing these things on a traditional 2D user interface with a mouse would be pretty hard, yet they're very intuitive given positional controller input. In this experiment, we also learned that giving users creative freedom can lead to unexpected outcomes. In the app, we added a clone button. People started to replicate objects lots of times. They were very creative. They built trees out of speakers. But ultimately, we learned that this creative freedom can also distract from the app's core use case. As a developer, you should consider that if you want to direct the user to perform certain tasks in your app. Controllers for VR have become incredibly precise and responsive. But just because this precision is possible, we don't require everyone to be precise all the time. Fluid interactions can be supported by allowing throwing or snapping together of objects. In VR, imprecise actions can lead to an ordered result instead of chaos. In our photo experiment, you can throw things at a wall to create a wallpaper, toss them around the room to share them, or scoop up a whole mess of photos just with one fluid motion. You can create a really neatly organized folder. To the user, it feels like the system is reading their minds, and it just works. We call this one drum keys. This is a volumetric keyboard. The buttons give visual, sound, and haptic feedback to the user. This makes the keyboard feel responsive and fun to use. The feedback may seem very subtle, but it is very noticeable when it is missing. Just for kicks, we made a game out of it to see who had the highest words per minute. There's so many new things you can learn and do with a VR controller. You should really try it yourself. It's really eye-opening to use computers in this way. With this, I'm going to hand over to Manuel to talk about immersion. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Manuel Clément. I'm a designer slash crazy prototyper on Daydream. In VR, there are many things that contribute to a sense of immersion. Your environment, how you move around, audio, and more. Let's look at a few things we've tried and learned about creating the sense of immersion and even increase it. This prototype demonstrates the importance of fluid, reactive environments. In VR, your environment is everything around you. In this case, a simple floor, a wall, and the sky. People naturally want to interact with their world, manipulate it. They push, they pull, they reach, and they even throw stuff. The more reactive your environment, the more immersive it will be. People will feel connected. It's so amazing to see a virtual world respond, come to life, obey, or even break the laws of physics. After interacting with our environment, the first thing people want to do is move around. The challenge is that many of the techniques that allow people to move around in large virtual environments can also make them lose context, which breaks immersion. In this case, you're looking at a technique commonly called teleportation. It works in most cases. Like, at one point, there's a Google logo. I want to go here. Oh, well, there you go. When there's a Google logo and you go there, because you have a frame of reference, it works fine. But if you're advancing through a forest and everything kind of looks the same, it's hard to understand what just happened. So we tried many things. We explored things to enable movement while preserving context when moving around large environments. We call this one slides and ladders. Pay attention to the top left corner. You can see a video of myself moving around in RR, real reality. Notice how small the room is. It's about 5 feet by 12 feet, not very large. There's slides that do what you expect. When you sit down on them, they go. There's ladders you just reach and pull to climb. There's a virtual gondola you can ride, and even you can float on a cloud across the sky. When people took off their headset, they were stunned to see how small the room was. They had forgotten because the VR environment they had experienced was massive. They never lost context. They traveled through a huge space there. We can't wait to see what you all will come up with to do teleportation and movement in VR. Here, we built a conveyor belt game. It lets you sort through cubes and eat donuts. What's important here is that it shows how even a flat-looking environment needs texture and shadows to feel real. In real reality, we never encounter flat colors. Let's imagine that a large object fills our field of view in VR, like a wall. It needs texture to maintain your sense of depth and scale. Look at the conveyor belt. You'll see that it's moving because it has a simple, noisy texture. What does it mean to you all? Stay away from flat colors and materials. Now we're going to do a little exercise. Let's all try to be quiet for a few seconds, not minutes. I'm going to count down. Ready? 3, 2, 1. As you probably noticed, the real world is never truly silent. Now let's all go somewhere else. I hear birds right there, and there was water all around me. In VR, technologies like spatial audio allow you to have audio coming from specific 3D locations. Audio is so important. We have a talk tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Do not miss it. For those of you who are used to 2D experiences, it's worth pointing out that in VR, the world is your 3D stage. You can have 2D UI like the map on this wall, where it makes sense. Additionally, the 3D map in the middle of the room displays dynamic data over time. In this case, US population per state. Users can walk around, they can inspect things and compare data points. 3D makes it easy to understand sizes and relationships intuitively. OK, we're all here today. That means that our ancestors at one point, they were in savannah, and they were able to tell the difference between a kitty cat and a lion. So bring on 3D UI. The goal should not always to be replicating reality. Reality is great in many cases. However, as humans, a few crazy elements, ingredients, can create these environments that really make you want to stay immersed in them. How about floating apples and bananas? Let's be serious for a second. We call this one fruit salad. Time and again, we saw people more engaged with playful environments. They were more delighted to invest time in the experience and explore. Don't be constrained by reality. When you design your environments, consider multiple vantage points, different scales. We call this one dollhouse. And when people realized they could be called tiny, they scream with joy. The kid inside them had always wanted to do this. It's amazing. This reminds me of my own daughter. She loves to make fairy houses in our backyard. And her deepest wish is to experience its magical worlds, to become a fairy. What if you were as big as the galaxy, or as small as an atom? I mean, you notice VR is a unique opportunity to experience the impossible. And now I'm going to hand it over to Robbie, who will talk about social in VR. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Hey everyone, I'm Robbie Tilton, a designer and prototyper on the Daydream team. We've talked about interactions and building immersive worlds. Let's talk about social. Our industry has already explored many possibilities with social in VR. Social apps really let you feel like you're in the same room as someone else, regardless of where you are in the world. We've done some experiments too, and we're really excited to share some of what we've learned. Let's start with avatars. There are many ways to represent people in VR. First, we found even simple avatars can be extremely expressive. This avatar's head only has a pair of eyes, and it's still able to communicate a lot of emotion just with the way it moves. When you combine this with hands and voice, all things come together to give a real sense of shared presence. You really feel like they're there in the room with you. Let's talk about eyes in a little more detail. In this video, you see the avatar blink, which is programmed to happen at a random interval. When the head turns, the pupils move in the direction it's headed. Even without other facial features, like a mouth or eyebrows, we were surprised by how connected we felt to this other individual. Eyes amplify face-to-face communication. They give people a clearer place to look to and speak toward. And we called this one googly eyes. When you're in VR and your avatar only has a head and hands, one of the first things you'll do is look down and ask yourself, where'd my body go? One thing we tried which really didn't work well, is showing full body avatars. Most VR systems today track head and hands. So by showing the body, we're basically predicting where the legs, arms, and torso should be. And most of the time, we got this wrong. People expected their body to be in one place, and when they looked, it was in a different place than they expected. It feels really weird. Full body avatars are really hard to get right. If you're going to use them, be thoughtful about the design and how they move. Let's talk about designing social interactions. We tested our social experiments with a lot of people. Just like in real reality, sometimes people end up in the same room and just had nothing to talk about. So to remedy this, think about giving users a shared objective. Giving them something to play with together makes it easy for them to socialize and break the ice. It was also interesting for us to see how free people felt in VR. In case you don't recognize him, that's Manuel Clement, who just spoke before me, dancing like no one's ever going to live stream this. Sorry about that, Manuel. Time after time, we saw people willing to have fun with others, dance around, jump, and get goofy. This is one of my favorite parts about social in VR. It's just a ton of fun. When you put a few people in a virtual room, one of the first things we saw is that people try to physically connect with each other. For example, people love high-fiving. As a developer, explore ways to amplify physical contact in VR. As just one approach, in this app, we combined haptic feedback with a fireworks animation every time the hands connected. Not everything in VR is fun and games. We noticed that some simple interactions that may seem innocent can come across as trolling in VR. Here you see a shopping experience where two people are trying on different hats and accessories. One user decides to playfully put a hat in front of the other user's eyes. While this may seem harmless, this can cause serious issues in VR. This user couldn't see anything. They felt like they lost control and even had to take their headset off. Another common problem is people getting too close to each other and invading personal space. So be cautious, test your apps out, and make sure users feel comfortable in social experiences. And with that, VR designers need to start thinking about rules and logic to prevent trolling. In this example, you see two dogs playing poker. Player one is about to lose a bet, and you'll see that they get up in frustration, intending to take their chips back. You'll also notice when they get out of their seat, the world turns gray. They disappear from the scene, and they can no longer interact with the world. By design, players can only see each other when they're both seated. This prevents things like stealing chips, or even something worse like physical confrontation. This is just one approach. We'd love to hear more ideas from you to encourage fair play. Especially in these early days, not everyone will have access to a VR headset. But many people will want to participate in the experience. One thing we tried is to let users film and share from inside VR with a virtual camera. It's like filming your own TV show. You just grab the camera and point it at whatever you want your audience to see. This lets anybody watch the VR participant in the virtual world from any screen, like a phone or laptop. For another example of this, check out the spectator camera in Tilt Brush. We're super excited about social in VR, and we're even more excited to hear your ideas and what you guys are going to build. Now I'll pass it back to Mike. Thank you.
So just to recap, we've talked about interactions, immersive worlds, and social. And when you bring these all together, you can build some pretty compelling experiences. So to close this talk, we're going to walk through a few more experiments that show how we can combine these things. People had so much fun with the drums experiment that we built another prototype all about playing music with friends. You can play a virtual xylophone, a harp, drum kit. Of course, you can move these around however you like. And you can do things that you can't in real life with real drums, like stack 5 of them on top of each other and strike them all at the same time. We call this one Architect. Many architecture firms use VR today to preview a 3D model that they design on their desktop computer. So we played with the idea of letting you design that model in VR. You can grab materials and pieces with direct manipulation and get tactile feedback. And when you place a piece in a certain spot, it just snaps right in, interpreting your intention. When you want to preview your design, you can step inside and get a whole new perspective. There are many examples of using VR for storytelling, especially in VR video. This prototype lets anyone be a storyteller in VR. Here, you can animate virtual toys into moving, lifelike characters. Inspired by motion capture systems used in Hollywood films, you grab a couple of toys, in this case android figurines, maybe a plane. You move them through space and time, and then you replay the scene and step into the world that you've built. It is make-believe on a whole new level. And that dog always cracks me up. We also love the notion of a pure thrill. And sometimes people will get skeptical of a VR experience that's a little straightforward. Where's the narrative? Where's the utility? We learned that sometimes just being someplace amazing is enough. In this experiment, we attached 2 controllers to your shoes and asked you to go for a walk off a diving board, 53 meters in the air. And it is absolutely terrifying. And not everyone can do it. But it's a lot of fun. In this experiment, we use social to teach you a new language. In this case, Mandarin. You interact with the teacher who gives you a new word to say, you repeat it back, and when you do a good job, you get verbal and nonverbal feedback from the teacher. You can also have a nice interaction with another student in the classroom. VR lets you see products at their true scale. This is especially powerful for larger, 3-dimensional, more expensive things, like furniture. VR also lets you design your store however you like. So for this experiment, we imagined what it would be like to shop for furniture in a 3D model of a home. You sample the different products, see how much they cost, maybe check out a couple of chairs, and then drop a specific speaker in a specific spot to see how it looks. Or I guess you can make a tree out of speakers. Hashtag speaker tree. And finally, we built an experiment for rehearsing performances and presentations with Google Slides. And we may have modeled this room, and maybe we used it for this specific talk. So that's the last thing we have to share with you today. Before you go, we have 2 quick things. First, we have a lot of great talks about VR today and tomorrow. We hope you check them out. Later today, we have a talk on monetization and distribution for Daydream. We have a talk on designing for the Daydream controller, where you can learn how to make your own frying pan. We also have a talk on VR design process, where you can learn more about how we do our rapid prototyping at Daydream Labs. This is just the start of a conversation. We're going to be posting regular updates to our blog, which is linked to here. We really look forward to staying in touch and hearing your feedback. Thank you so much. We can't wait to see what everyone builds. Thank you.